a loony. You need to be a little loony to collect books after a certain time. My degree is in biology. My career was in information technology, and I'm currently working as the rare book cataloger for a dealer in Glendale. It all fits together really neatly. So I've been collecting for many years, and as when you take a look at the gallery, you'll see there's some of my books that I brought in we have on display today. But Rachel asked me to talk on how to go about collecting rare books. Well, it's easier said than done. So, oh, wrong century, sorry.
Ready for the lights, Merle? Okay.
Thank you. That's enough.
Okay, that still works. And there we go. Just had to wake up the computer. Okay, so the types of collecting. Okay, you can collect things in many different ways. By subject or genre, mystery writers. You could actually collect Reader's Digest condensed volumes if you really were desperate. I mean, they're absolutely worthless. I mean, they won't even burn. And Goodwill and Salvation Army will not take them. They are absolutely useless. But by author, if you want to collect a particular author, such as Mark Twain, which was one of the authors I collected. Mary Roberts Reinhardt, she was a very important early 20th century mystery writer, who incidentally happened to invent, well, she never wrote this in the book, but the butler did it. She's the one that originated that whole business. So illustrators, there are many, many illustrators that you want to collect the work of, say, Arthur Rackham, a very prolific illustrator in the early part of the 20th century. Maybe you want to go for specific publishers or within a certain time period. My collection has, from James I to James II of England, political, social, science, history. You can use that kind of parameters. Or association, something that was owned by someone. I have a very tedious 17th century religious book that is absolutely the world's most boring thing to read. That's why I haven't read it. But it has an inscription in it, Isaac Walton, given me by Dr. Donne. So it was John Donne's, the poet's book, given to Isaac Walton, author of The Complete Angler. So association, that's another. The most restrictive is a cabinet collection, where you say, I'm going to have 100 of the finest books. And that's it. Anything gets displaced, you got to take something out before you put something in. So here's an example of if you're collecting American lit. Colonial imprints are anything printed by Bradford, who's a very early colonial printer. You might have heard of this other guy here, Franklin. Anybody ever heard of him? Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, he did something other than sign the Declaration, a couple other things. And there are lots that you could go with 19th century authors. The Bibliography of American Lit, it's the resource for American Lit. There were a lot of famous collectors. Samuel Pepys, back in the 17th century, his collection, as a matter of fact, is currently in Cambridge. You really have to twist some arms to get in to see it, but it's in the original bookcases that he had built for his collection. Richard Heber got a little out of control. He was early 19th century, and he collected somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 books. It was spread over about 9 different houses in England and on the continent. A little out of control, but as he said, no gentleman can afford to be without 3 copies of a book. One to read, one to loan, and one for show. Well, that was his policy. Sir Thomas Phillips was almost as nutty in collecting. And Robert Hoe, if you're familiar with the Hoe printing press, his fortune, the family fortune, allowed Robert Hoe to buy lots and lots of fine books in the 19th century. As a matter of fact, at the Huntington, you'll find the Gutenberg Bible. It's one of very, very few that are printed on vellum. And that was purchased at the Robert Hoe sale in the early 19th century, early 20th century, by Henry Huntington, who was absolutely thought to be some kind of a nut, because he paid $50,000 for this Bible. That's crazy. Well, you'd be lucky if you could find one under 50 million today, if another one were to be discovered. So, not a bad investment. J.P. Morgan, the banker, if anybody been to the Morgan in New York City? Wonderful library, some of the most amazing treasures, lots of illuminated manuscripts from before printing. And Henry Clay Folger at the Folger Library in Washington, D.C. The inscription on the building is, "To William Shakespeare and the greater glory of God." So the catch is that Shakespeare gets top billing, but God gets the greater glory. And then, of course, our own Henry Huntington, H.E., as you probably are aware, built this little art museum out in San Marino in the library. If you haven't been there recently, by all means go. We are very lucky to have some of the finest treasures in the country or in the world out there. So, a little tale of H.E. as he's my favorite book collector. A.S.W. Rosenbach, Abraham Simon Wolf Rosenbach, was the dealer who supplied most of the rare books to Huntington. And Lord Joseph Devine was the art dealer that sold Huntington things like the Blue Boy, Pinky, Sarah Siddons, all of the really fine pieces. And so this was back in the early 20s. Henry Huntington was in the hospital for a minor operation. He was laying in his bed in the hospital with his arms outstretched a bit, and the 2 dealers came to see him to see how he's doing. Well, they didn't have much to talk about between themselves because they're in direct competition for Huntington's dollars. So one was on either side of Huntington's bed. Huntington looked at them and he said, "Joe, do I remind you of anybody?" And of course, Devine just sort of, "Well, no, Mr. Huntington. I don't recall." And so he turned to Rosenbach and said the same thing. "Do I remind you of anybody?" "No." So Huntington said, "Well, lying here, I remind myself of Christ between the 2 thieves." There. Okay, so old. We hear that a lot. Old books. I've done a loan